Well, I changed my lighting around and made it really dark, but it's perfect because I'm now sipping on some Jim Beam honey bourbon, which I can highly recommend. Goes great with the cold beer. So I'm going to continue on and pick up on a topic that I brought up in the last video, and something needs to be discussed. A lot of these videos aren't going to be as chronologically in order as I may have wished them to be, but nevertheless, it's how I'm going to do it. And I really want to focus on the whole sexuality part of the relationship, more so than some of the comments I've made. Here's why sex is vital in a marriage. For one, the man's needs must be met. That's understood in every religious tradition that you were to keep one unto the other, which was referring to, of course, sexuality. Don't screw around. And, if you want to go by the whole biblical thing, which is the type of marriage I thought I'd entered into, and it says your body doesn't belong to you and her body doesn't belong to her, they belong to each other, which is another thing of saying, hey, you're going to meet each other's needs, and this is where you're going to get your needs met. And so when those needs are not being met, it becomes a massive problem for the person who has the desire to continue meeting that need. And it's more than just the sexual release, although that is important. And anything I tell you here, you can go and Google this stuff, but I assure you it's accurate. When a man has sex and reaches climax, his brain pumps out an amazing amount of these fantastic chemicals. And these chemicals are epinephrine, they are dopamine, serotonin. They're feel-good drugs that your brain makes. And one of the most important ones that we get pretty much only through sexual intercourse as men is one called oxytocin. And that's one that's worth taking a little bit of time to look into. This is the bonding chemical. It's what bonds us to other human beings. Can we get this in other ways? Sure. You can get this oxytocin over a longer period of time with male friends. It doesn't make it sexual, but it helps us to bond. You get oxytocin, and your dog gets oxytocin when they sit on your lap or you pet their head or whatever, and it bonds you together. So it's a chemical that's evolved into humanity to bring the male and the female of the species together and bond them together for at least long enough to get the brood raised. We human beings have a tendency to stretch this out because we don't pop out 5 or 6 pups at one time. Usually it's one at a time over a period of 4, 5, 6 years. And so you're looking at a commitment of about 25 to 30 years in child rearing and getting them up. So it's there, it's important if you want to keep them together. And I can remember very early on mentioning this. Of course, you have to remember, women ordinarily think they're smarter than you, and rarely is that the case. But I would bring it up and say, we are not going to be able to bond properly without having a sexual relationship. And here's where a little bit more of that gaslighting. Gaslighting is this. You make the other person feel like they're the kook, that they're the nuts, that they are the ones who have the issue and not you. You're basically telling the other person that they're crazy, and it's a very cruel and manipulative thing to do, and we as men have to become experts at seeing this, because it's something that is utilized a great deal among women. They use two things. Gaslighting is a big one. Shaming is the biggest one. Okay? And both of those we're very, very susceptible to. So anyway, it was interesting because even relatively early on, you think about your future. You try to see what the future might look like. Sitting on the front porch with your spouse and the rocking chairs and grandkids around and all that stuff. And very quickly I realized I can't see it. I could see my own future and project into it and think about it, but this woman wasn't going to be a part of it. And I knew that and continue to stay in there. But without the sexuality, the bonding was not going to happen. Without the oxytocin, it was not going to happen. Excuse me. Oh, cheers, by the way. And it wasn't going to happen, and I knew this, and it was brought up several times. And of course, I was poo-pooed away that that's not important. And of course, it was, and it is, and it's scientifically proven. And most good counselors, of which there probably aren't very many, but the few good ones out there would agree with what I'm saying right now. And that wasn't happening whatsoever. And our bodies become adjusted to these chemicals, and we need these chemicals. Sex is part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Clearly delineates this, and it's something worth looking into. We got to have food, we got to have water, we got to have shelter, we need air, those kind of things. And we also need sex, and we also need intimacy, and we also need to be a part of a larger group. These needs must be met prior to getting to that level of self-actualization. So if one of those needs is cut off, if you found out that your neighbor down the street was refusing to feed a child, you would call the welfare agency to come involved, because they are neglecting their child, which is a form of abuse. And it took me a while to get there, because abuse is usually, well, somebody's punching on the other. Well, no, abuse takes a whole lot of different forms. And a non-sexual marriage where the other person is committed enough where they are not looking or attempting to find sexual release outside of that, and the other person knows it, and they still deny you this need, then you have entered into an abusive relationship. So I feel very confident in stating I was in an abusive relationship. I had an abuser as a spouse. Did she ever lay hands on me? No. Did I ever lay hands on her? No. But when you neglect a need that has been brought up over and over again, that is causing suffering in that other person and is ultimately causing problems within the marriage, then you have an abusive situation. And that's what I found myself in. And without the sexual intercourse, you will not bond to that person. That is why we have always encouraged people not to be overly promiscuous. Men have a tendency to be able to do that and still have a healthy commitment to a female. Women who are overly promiscuous, the studies are clear on this, they have a little bit more trouble bonding to another human being. And I think that probably played a role in my marriage. I have a feeling that at one stage in her life, probably right after marriage, she went out and, right after her first divorce, she probably went out and practiced a lot of sluttery. Anyway, that's an important thing. And I'm going to kind of put the whole sexual thing to rest as far as that goes. This was an abusive, neglectful sexless marriage. And these little things that I do, little snippets I've thrown in there, if they're of interest to you, it is well worth researching. If you're thinking about getting married, if you're just trying to understand the dynamics of relationships, if you're thinking about getting involved on a long-term commitment, don't go in there ignorant. I'm going to say it over and over again. Read, study, and do it voraciously. And don't expect anybody to tell you, because I would go around and I talked to female friends that I trusted, and I'd ask them, what in the fuck does this woman want from me, and why is this happening? And of course they all have opinions, and it took me a long time to realize you can't ask a woman what another woman wants, because they don't know what they want. They do not know what they want. And if you're trying to get answers, asking the female is not the way to go. Anyway, guys, life is hard. Don't make it any harder than it needs to be. Try out some of this Jim Beam honey whiskey. It's pretty good. Keep it real. Bye.